Good morning. My name is Craig Hill, and this presentation examines the comparative economic performance of Australia and India over the period from 2014 to 2024. The focus of this presentation is to analyse key macroeconomic indicators such as GDP growth, unemployment, inflation and exchange rates, and to evaluate the fiscal and monetary policies used by both countries to manage economic fluctuations. Australia and India provide a strong comparison because they represent two very different economic systems. Australia is a developed high-income economy, while India is a rapidly growing emerging economy. By comparing these two economies, we can better understand how different policy approaches influence economic stability and growth. This presentation is structured into four main sections. First, I will provide a macroeconomic analysis of Australia's economy over the past decade. Second, I will analyse India's economic performance over the same period. Third, I will compare the effectiveness of fiscal and monetary policies used in both countries. Finally, I will conclude by evaluating which policy approaches have been more effective in managing economic fluctuations and promoting long-term growth. The key economic indicators examined throughout this presentation include GDP, inflation, unemployment, and exchange rates. Over the past decade, both Australia and India have operated within a highly interconnected global economy. Globalisation has increased trade, investment flows, and economic interdependence between countries. However, it has also increased exposure to global shocks. The most significant disruption during this period was the COVID-19 epidemic in 2020, which caused widespread economic contraction due to lockdowns and reduced global demand. In addition, supply chain disruptions and rising energy prices led to a global inflation surge in 2022 and 2023. These global challenges required strong policy responses from government and central banks to stabilise economic activity. Australia is a highly developed mixed economy with strong institutions and a high standard of living. The economy is dominated by the services sector, which accounts for approximately 70% of GDP. Key industries include finance, education, healthcare and tourism. Australia is also a major exporter of natural resources such as iron ore, coal and liquefied natural gas. These exports are particularly important for trade with Asia, especially China. Due to its reliance on global trade and commodity markets, Australia's economic performance is closely linked to global demand and price fluctuations. Australia's GDP growth over the past decade has been relatively stable compared to many other economies. Between 2014 and 2019, economic growth averaged around 2 to 3% annually. However, in 2020, Australia experienced its first recession in nearly 30 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Economic activity declined sharply as lockdowns reduced consumption and investment. The economy recovered strongly in 2021 and 22, supported by government stimulus and strong commodity exports. More recently, growth has slowed due to rising interest rates and inflationary pressures. Australia has maintained relatively low unemployment over the past decade. Before the pandemic, unemployment rates were generally between 5 and 6%. During the recovery period, unemployment fell to around 3.5%, indicating a strong labour market. Inflation remained stable within the Reserve Bank's target of 2 to 3% for most of the decade. However, inflation rose significantly in 2022 due to global supply disruptions, increased energy costs, and strong consumer demands. This created the need for tighter monetary policy. Australia responded to economic fluctuations using both monetary and fiscal policy. The Reserve Bank of Australia reduced interest rates to historically low levels during the pandemic to stimulate borrowing and investment. It also implemented quantitative easing to increase liquidity in financial markets. On the fiscal side, the government introduced major stimulus programs, including the JobKeeper wage subsidy. This helped businesses retain employees and prevented a sharp rise in unemployment. Infrastructure spending and direct payments to households also supported economic recovery. These policies were largely effective in stabilising the economy. India is one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. With a population of over 1.4 billion people, India has a large labour force and a rapidly expanding domestic market. The economy is diverse with strong contributions from agriculture, manufacturing and services. The services sector, particularly information technology and digital services, has been a major driver of growth in recent years. Despite this growth, India faces structural challenges such as infrastructure limitations and income inequality. India has experienced significantly higher GDP growth compared to Australia. Over the past decade, annual growth has often exceeded 6%, making it one of the fastest growing economies globally. However, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a sharp contraction in 2020 due to strict lockdown measures. Despite this, India recovered quickly due to strong domestic demand and government stimulus measures. In recent years, India has continued to maintain strong economic growth, supported by industrial expansion and digital transformation. Inflation in India has generally been higher and more volatile than in Australia. Over the past decade, inflation has typically ranged between 4 and 6%. The Reserve Bank of India introduced an inflation targeting framework in 2016, aiming to maintain inflation around 4%. Global factors such as rising energy prices and supply chain disruptions have also affected inflation levels in India. Managing inflation remains a key challenge for policymakers due to the country's large population and diverse economy. Unemployment figures are not readily available in India. India has used a combination of monetary policy and fiscal expansion to support economic growth. The Reserve Bank of India adjusts interest rates to control inflation and stabilises the economy. On the fiscal side, the government has implemented major initiatives such as the Make in India program, which aims to boost manufacturing and attract foreign investment. Infrastructure investment in transport, energy and digital systems has also been a key policy focus. These policies are designed to support long-term economic development and structural transformation. When comparing the two economies, clear differences emerge. Australia has stable but slower economic growth, reflecting its status as a mature, developed economy. India, on the other hand, has higher growth rates but also greater volatility due to structural challenges. Inflation tends to be lower and more stable in Australia, while India experiences higher inflation variability. Labour markets also differ significantly, with Australia having a more formal and stable employment structure, while India has a large informal structure. In terms of policy effectiveness, Australia's approach has been highly successful in maintaining economic stability. Monetary policy has played a central role with the Reserve Bank effectively managing inflation and economic cycles. India's policy approach is focused more on long-term growth through fiscal expansion and structural reforms. While this has supported rapid economic growth, it also creates challenges in managing inflation and employment. Overall, both countries have used effective policies, but the success depends on their economic structures. In conclusion, both Australia and India have demonstrated resilience in managing economic challenges over the past decade. Australia's growth institutions and effective monetary policy have supported stable growth and low unemployment. India's rapid growth has been driven by fiscal investment, structural reforms, and a large domestic market. The comparison highlights that there is no single approach to economic management. Instead, policy effectiveness depends on the specific economic conditions of each country. Both economies will continue to face challenges, particularly in managing inflation and sustaining growth. This presentation is drawn on data analysis from sources such as the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, Reserve Bank of Australia, and Reserve Bank of India. Additional academic resources, including macroeconomics textbooks and peer-reviewed journal articles, have been used to support the analysis and provide theoretical context. These references ensure that the analysis presented is reliable, relevant, and grounded in established economic research.